Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast, episode 285. Dave Anderson in Dallas, and also in Dallas, Tim Siegel, our guest, Tim Siegel. Let's do a sound check. Dave, can you hear us?
All good. Ready to go.
And how about you, Tim?
All set. Looking forward to it.
All right. Let's start with, I tease and say what type of baby food did you start with? What was your favorite type? Tell us your love for tennis. How'd you get going in the game, your long journey in tennis?
Well, I started playing tennis at a very early age. I was around 6 years old. I played my first tournament at age 7. I lived near a tennis club in Metairie, Louisiana, just outside of New Orleans. Honestly, I played tennis my whole life ever since I was 7. Was fortunate enough to have played junior tournaments throughout the state of Louisiana and then national tournaments beginning at age 11. I was fortunate to have had some success early on as a young kid and loved playing nationally and really took a real big liking to double. Really had some success on the double side of it in the juniors. So that was where my tennis career began.
If you're from New Orleans, how do the natives pronounce it? Give it to us one more time.
I would say New Orleans.
All
yeah.
Right.
The natives say New Orleans. But I do hear New Orleans from those that are not from New Orleans.
And how about influences in your young life as far as getting you going in tennis?
Well, my parents played recreationally at a club. I had some really good coaches when I was young, but I was fortunate to have been able to practice with some older gentlemen and some men and some older kids. And so I was really just inspired to play, and I just loved to practice. I loved to compete, and I really loved the idea of trying to improve. You know, when I was 12 years old, I was the 4th ranked junior, and then I kept going nationally, maybe top 20 every year. But the doubles was what I really focused on as much as anything, and at least in the top 2 or 3. Some years was ranked number 1, had a couple of national titles in doubles. So, you know, I just was so inspired. I knew at an early age I wanted to be a professional, and I did everything that I could to get to that level.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, Tim, you played doubles, won a title nationally with Pat Harrison, correct?
That is correct.
Tell us a little bit about his intensity when he was a kid.
You know, Pat grew up in Shreveport. I was in New Orleans, and we actually played against each other because we were 1 and 2 in the state, pretty much every age group. We played against each other, I think, 36 times. And I lost 1. And I lost the one at the state tournament, 7-6 in the 3rd. But every match with him was tough. But when we played doubles, I was the, aggressive at the net and tried to be solid and smart. Pat was the flashy, talented, great hand, was pretty casual. We had a great relationship. You know, Pat was and always will be such a good friend. He loved to play. He came from a family of a lot of tennis players in his family, and we really bonded, and we still have that tremendous bond even today. We keep in touch quite a bit. Of course, I'm been following Ryan's career, and then certainly now Christian's career, his son, who has overcome so many injuries. So Pat and I, it's a special thing when you have someone you played tennis with since you were 10 years old, and now I'll be 62 very soon, and Pat just turned 62. So we've been friends for a long, long time.
No, Christian is great. He's doing so well. I've always pulled for him because that's a guy who's had a lot of bad luck when it comes to injuries. Christian Harrison.
He really has. And, everything kind of took off for him at the Dallas Open last February when he had to qualify, and he was ranked around 80 in the world. And then he and Evan King ended up being top 8. And now Christian is playing in the Australian Open with Skupski, who has won numerous Grand Slams. So I think this is going to be a good pairing this year for them.
When they were in Shreveport, one of Pat's longtime friends, Gary Lemoyne, he used to bring his son Micah to Florida, but they would stop in Shreveport. They would come from Champaign, Illinois. And, they would always talk about, people thought I was tough, but Pat Harrison was tougher, according to Micah and Gary Lemoyne. But
Well, Pat's dad was tough on him, and then now, of course, Pat is tough on his kids, but in a loving, encouraging way, but also pretty demanding. And Pat is one heck of a great coach. We know that for sure.
yeah, there's some stories where I think at Kalamazoo one time he just gave Ryan like $25 and said, "Find your way home." Those are life lessons. But family's very good friends with the Krycheks, and it was rainy day at the U.S. Open, and I was just at the table with the Harrison family, and they were talking about intensity. That's what Dave's question was. And so Pat lost it at one point, like we all have in the world of sport. And so he was in the parking lot, and he was taking a racket and he was banging it against the car. But the punchline was, and he took care of it, but he goes, "I apologize." He took care of the expense, but it was not his car. Those rental cars, you take off, I'm hitting the wrong rental car. So how'd you find your way to Arkansas?
Well, when I was a senior in high school, I had narrowed my choices to Clemson, Arkansas, TCU, and Texas. LSU was probably my fifth choice. So those were the top five. And I was very close to becoming a Clemson Tiger with Coach Chuck Creasy. But I decided to go to Arkansas because they had an incredible doubles team of Peter Dewan, Pat Starrett. They had just won the national championship in doubles. The team was top five. But I also had a couple of good close friends. Jose Lambert, who was from New Orleans, who actually was at IMG for a long time, and then Pat Mahaffey also. So I had two friends that had just gone there, and then my closest friend, Bobby Bank, decided that the two of us were going to go to school together. And so it was the perfect place for me. I just loved being a Razorback. We had tremendous success as a team. We were top 10 all 4 years, made the quarterfinals of the NCAA as a team twice. And then my senior year, I lost in the semifinals of the NCAA doubles with my partner, Richard Schmidt. And so, but just a wonderful time. I think University of Arkansas is one of the best kept secrets in the country. Beautiful place, a lot of school spirit, and I'm really blessed and grateful to have spent 4 great years there.
I think of Peter Newhan, he is the one who beat Becker, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Beat Becker at Wimbledon after Becker had won it. Yeah.
Well, you were an All-American a couple times, and then from there, you played all the majors. Tell us about that.
Yes, when I left Arkansas in December of '86, and I had won a few challengers and tournaments prior, so I graduated in December of '86 and literally got on an airplane on Christmas Eve, flew to Australia and got into the Australian Open. And I'll never forget this. This was, when you get your feet wet and you hope to have some success early, first round of the Australian Open, we're playing Miloslav Machir, who was, number one in the world. And he and his partner, Milan Schreiber, who was about 6'9" at the time. And we played the last year that it was on grass at Kooyong. And my partner and I, Mike Smith, who had played at Duke, he and I were up 6-4, 5-2 double break on grass and lost 15-13 in the third in the first round of the Australian Open. So that was unfortunately, my toughest moment. And it was my first moment on the pro tour being an actual pro playing. But it also showed me, though, that I could play with these guys. And shortly after, I'd done pretty well the rest of the first half of the year. This is now in 1987, and at the U.S. Open that year, my partner and I had made the third round. I played with a guy named Nelson Aerts from Brazil. We were the very last team to get in. And the greatest story about this is not only were we the last team to get in, but on the way to our first round match, he turns to me and says, "Which side do you play?" I said, "Well, I play the ad court." He goes, "Well, so do I." I said, "Well, you're playing the ad court." And so we go out there and we played. They were seeded 16th. Eric Yellen and Navratil, his brother. We beat them, and then we beat Paul McNamee and John Lloyd second round. and then lost in the third round in 3 sets to Edberg and Yared, who won the tournament that year. They, of course, won in the world. So I felt like I belonged. My style of play, I really liked my return. I was very aggressive, wanted to be, focused on being quick at the net. My serve was probably below average. Not probably, it was below average, but I could get in pretty well behind it. But I really loved playing on the tour, playing doubles, and played against a lot of great players. I had a win over Lendl in doubles at the Canadian Open. He played with Bill Scanlon. I lost to McEnroe and McEnroe. Had a big win over Noah and Annacone at one tournament. But I played for about just under 3 years. And, the biggest mistake I made, and as you get older, you don't think about regrets, but the biggest mistake I made was that I left the tour too soon. I was just rising up the ranks, around 100 in the world, but I always, in the back of my mind, knew that I wanted to be a college coach. And so, most players, it takes, a good 3, 4, 5 years to really feel acclimated. And unfortunately for me, it was less than 3 years, but even because at the end of my 3 years, I was actually coaching players on the tour. I spent time with Richie Renneberg. I spent time with Joey Reve, Todd Whitkin. I also traveled with Robert Seguso and his wife Carling. So I did a lot of coaching while I was playing, which is not conducive to improving your ranking. So I went through a lot, but ultimately I did get to my goal, which was to be a college tennis coach. So no regrets. I did regret it at the time, but certainly not now, because coaching in college was something that I always felt was in my blood.
I remember having dinner with you and Steve Denton, and you just mentioned Robbie Seguso and his wife Carling Bassett. Dave and I were connected with Arthur Cohen when Robbie. We were the first two tennis pros to show up, and it was short lived. But Robbie and Carling had the Seguso Bassett Academy. So, but Arthur, he was one of your sponsors.
Yes, he was. It was called the A Team back there, and I was one of, I believe, 4 or 5 people that he sponsored for a 3-year commitment, and so appreciative because I lived in Fort Lauderdale and trained there, and Craig Wittes was my coach, and it was a great experience. I really felt like without a sponsor, it's not easy. And back then, what you made in doubles, I believe I made $3,000 losing the third round of the U.S. Open back then. So the income now is certainly better than it ever was in doubles. Still not great, but you can certainly make a living on the doubles tour now.
Tim, where did you start your college coaching? SMU, right?
I spent 2 years as Dennis Ralston's assistant, as the men's assistant coach, and then the women's head coach. And I was there for 2 years, learned a lot from Dennis, really enjoyed the men's side. And I'd gotten a phone call from the athletic director at Texas Tech following my second year, and decided to give it a go, and spent 23 years at Texas Tech and really loved the campus. I loved the community. Texas Tech reminded me a little bit of Arkansas, not from a beauty standpoint, but from a school spirit standpoint. And, back then, I started in 1993, and the first 10 years in coaching, we played our matches and practiced at different clubs, and even played at Lubbock High School. We had no facility until 2003. And so then really starting in 2004 is when everything changed for our team, until, of course, 2015 when I resigned. But it was everything changed when you have a nice facility. And from that point, I guess the next 10 to 13 years, we were consistently in the top 20, top 25. Had a couple of double teams in 2012 and 2015 that made the finals of the NCAAs. Our team, a couple of years, got to top 10, but kind of was around between 12 and 20 for the majority of my last 10 years. But I love coaching. I love the ability to connect with my players, but I was demanding. I really was tough when it came to being on time, to playing hard, to really try to develop my players. But I spent probably more time with my players off court, in the office and the van ride, talking about life, talking about discipline, talking about things that I think would impact my players when they left Texas Tech. And I do feel like I have a great relationship with the majority of my players. I think I have 15 former Tech tennis players that live in the DFW area that I coach, and then I speak to quite a few through WhatsApp or through text that are from all over the world, and really blessed, and was always so grateful to have coached at such a great university for such a long time.
Yeah, 23 years. Yeah, I would like to back up and ask about Dennis Ralston, but Dave, why don't you ask a question first?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can go with your Dennis Ralston. I remember it was probably 93, 94 watching you. You played the Cotton Bowl with Ralston one year, didn't you?
That's correct. That is absolutely correct. I remember
the very first indoor court. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
I did
very first.
those couple of days. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, regarding the college tennis, I think for the parents and the players that might be listening, tell us a little bit about in the recruiting process, what kind of things were very, very important to you as you look to bring a kid into your program?
The very first thing is when I would ask for a transcript or when I would ask for, just some information. If the player was really good at getting back to me, I knew this is the kind of kid that I wanted. But I also knew that when it took weeks or it took days to get something or to get in contact with one of their coaches, I kind of had a sense this was probably not my kind of player. I tried my very best to get to know the players from a family standpoint first. I want to know what their family was like. I wanted to learn about things where their passion was. I remember coaching Brazilian players and I felt a connection with them because they loved soccer. I wanted to know their passion for soccer. So when it came to the recruiting process, you could only do so much, right? When it came to going to watch them play or going to visit them at their home. And sometimes it was just having them come visit Texas Tech, of course. But I had a lot of players from overseas, but I really tried to have my conversations with my players where I wasn't just talking to them. I wanted them to talk to me. And I was also one of those coaches that never told my recruits what they wanted to hear. I told them how it was going to be, that I was going to develop them. I was going to be tough on them, but their tennis would improve. They would learn a lot about life and they would work hard. And if I sensed that my players in the recruiting process were more interested in whether or not Lubbock had an ocean or a mountain, those weren't my kind of players. And because obviously we didn't in Lubbock, but I just wanted a blue collar type of mentality. I wanted kids that loved the game, that were passionate about the game. And sometimes there were hits and sometimes there were misses. You could only learn so much about players early on. But what I will tell you is that in my 23 years of coaching, I believe I dismissed 4 or 5 players, and all those players played number one for me. I wasn't one of those coaches that would keep a player because he would win matches for me or he played number one. And I just wanted the team to understand this is how it's going to be. And we're going to get the best results when players bought into the culture that I wanted, to the work ethic that I wanted, to how well we encouraged each other. I wanted our team to be such a close-knit team when it came to cheering for each other. And I was also very aware that when you're recruiting players from all over the world, you had to get to know your players. And it's a lot to ask players coming from Brazil or Europe or Australia. And so I really tried to learn what made them tick, because you're coaching differently to every player. But we also did a lot of things off the court as a team, whether it was go bowling or play putt-putt or go to movies. We also did a lot on the road. I took my players to football games, basketball games, baseball games, Indian Wells, because I learned a lot about my players the more we did off the court. And ultimately, I felt like I had a team that played hard. And I was most proud of that and for the way they represented Texas Tech in the classroom and of course, off the court as well.
Tim, 23 years at Texas Tech. we come back and you could highlight some of the things you learned from Dennis Ralston. But Bobby Knight, was he there during your time?
Yes, I was blessed to have Coach Knight and Mike Leach, two legends in their respective fields. I took my team to watch Coach Knight practice because I was a student of the game as a kid. I wasn't blessed with a lot of size, a lot of power. I had to learn the X's and O's. I had to learn what it took. And so I did the same thing as a coach. And I watched Coach Knight practice, and I watched the way they played their games, and I talked to Coach Leach about a lot about that as well. And so Coach Knight was amazing, the way he would construct practices. And we were good friends. He came to watch our team play. Coach Leach was also that way as well. And Dennis Ralston, obviously was a tremendous player. So I think we connected because he coached against me when he was at SMU and when I was at Arkansas. So he knew a lot about me. And so then when he came back for his second stint, he called me and said I was the tennis director at the Indianapolis Sports Center for 6 months. And when he called me, I couldn't get to Dallas quick enough because I wanted to soak up all of his knowledge. I learned a lot about balance and footwork and shot selection and toughness and picked his brain a lot. And, I knew all of his stories when he was, he had that temper that was legendary, but also some of his Davis Cup days and what it was like winning Wimbledon at 17. So he was such a great mentor to me.
I had the chance to watch Ralston, several summers because of the late Steve Squire played doubles with him, an Englishman. And back in the day, the top players, they would take out a year-round membership at Grass Court Club in London. So when they got there, they had a place to practice. I remember Lendl showing up, and he was just climbing up. He was top 10 in the world, and he asked the little lady at the register with the horn-rimmed glasses if he could play. She said, "One moment." And she went in the back room, and she said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Lendl, you're not a member." But my friend was a club champion, so I had reign. I could just be there all day long, and that was back when Dennis Ralston was coaching Chris Everett. But then another time I
Right.
watched him at the Felt Forum. My brothers were the Rangers, and he coached a lot of big time guys. I think it was Tanner and Gottfried at that time he was working with. But yeah, a lot of people tennis history. He was so good, so young too.
Sure was.
College tennis over the 23 years. How do you think it changed as far as the kids? I mean, the parents, or you think didn't change that much?
Well, a lot of coaches will say the kids are different. Well, to me, it will always come down to the parents. I was blessed with tremendous tennis parents. They let my coaches coach, and they demanded one thing from me, that I play hard and that I, respected the game. And so, but they weren't up in my business nonstop or the coaches. They watched practice rarely and they trusted my coaches. And so when I see players in the recruiting process that feel entitled or feel that what are you going to do for me as opposed to what what they could do for me, it comes down to the parents. And I quite a lot. I had discussions with parents that we didn't see eye to eye on what I expected from their child. And so that was interesting for sure. But I just think that but every kid wants to be coached and wants to be coached hard. Sometimes there's resistance, certainly, but ultimately, if they really love the game and are passionate about the game, they do want that. So many times, though, I would have players that liked tennis, didn't love it. And I was one of those coaches that if you didn't love it, I got you not to like it at all because I was so demanding and expected a lot out of you in the classroom and on the tennis court. And so there were certain players that didn't mesh as well with me, but those that loved to play and that loved to grind and get better, well, we had a great relationship. But those that didn't, it didn't work or didn't last very long.
Oh, that's so well put. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I love the way you said that, Tim. If you were a player who just liked it, you got them to the point where they didn't like it at all. I think that's brilliant. Yeah, in regard to college tennis, Tim, and being such with your background in doubles, any comments on the nature of the game now? The doubles that you're seeing played throughout the college ranks. I know in a few weeks we are lucky to host the ITA team championships here at SMU. The doubles has certainly changed from when you and Surratt and those guys were banging balls up in Arkansas. But any comments on where it is today and thoughts on it?
Well, I think not only in college, but certainly on the pro side, that when I guess there's two things that come to mind when it comes to pro. Back when I played, everybody played singles and doubles. McEnroe, Edberg, Lendl even played some doubles. These guys, all the top singles players also play doubles. Obviously today, that's not the case. But the game has changed so dramatically. I was serving and volleying at a 95 or 100 mile an hour serve. I would have trouble doing that today because it is a lot more serve and stay back. But when I was coaching in college, I still worked on my players serving and volleying. I still worked on coming forward and putting pressure. I believed in putting pressure on my opponent, and we worked a lot on doubles as far as movement. When to cross, when to play returns through the middle, right at someone. And I think because I was such a big fan of doubles and also understood that in college, that first point was crucial, that my kids really got better. And I can use an example. Gonzalo Escobar, who is getting ready to play the Australian Open doubles tomorrow, played number 3 doubles for me a couple of years. And then played number 1 doubles and made the finals of the NCAA from Ecuador and got up to 40 in the world doubles, currently 80 in the world. And really tried to get my players to understand that the better you get in doubles, the better it will help your singles and vice versa. And so I'm not a huge fan of the serving staying back. I am still a fan though of the game. And these guys are serving much bigger today than when I played. And that's one thing certainly that I see. But it still comes down to who's the smartest, who's looking to move the most, cover the middle the best, and putting returns in play. That's still, back then and today, still the key.
Your loyalty to Texas Tech, I don't know if I have this story right, but I've set it straight. Steve Denton told me the story that A&M had wine and dined you and they wanted you to come to A&M and you were contemplating going to A&M and then at one point you say, okay, I'm going to go to A&M, but then you said, no, I can't leave Texas Tech. And then it was just one phone call and Denton said, my friend Tim Siegel, it's just one phone call and I got the job at A&M. Tell us, am I close on that story?
You are pretty darn accurate. I had visited A&M and, A&M this was late 90s. We had one really good year, I think 95, 96, top 25, and A&M called me and, great new facility and a great team. But there are a couple of things that helped me back. One, I had 3 very young children and then a daughter from a previous marriage who was getting ready to be a freshman in high school. But more importantly, it was what I felt about Texas Tech. I wanted to turn a program that had no success and turn it into a very good team. Could I have taken A&M from 10 to 15 to number 1? Who knows? But I just didn't want to not turn Texas Tech into a tennis program. And I'll never forget, I turned the job down. The next morning, I get a phone call very early telling me that he would offer me daycare for my 3 children and up my salary, and still decided to stay at Texas Tech because I felt unfinished business. And, when I got to Texas Tech, we were not the top 75. And when I left, we won the Big 12. In my last year, actually, the year that I left, the following year, the team won the Big 12 and was top 10. So I was just one of those guys that just wanted to see this team accomplish something that it had not done. And I don't ever look back at that because I learned a lot and I love the university. And, I guess it was sort of that mentality. I was a big Saints fan growing up. I wasn't the fan of the Cowboys or the Niners where they had success. And so I guess I looked at it like I'm going to turn Texas Tech into a program that they've never seen before. And I was blessed to have been able to do that for quite a few years.
The New Orleans football team, at one point, their fans were wearing a brown grocery bags over their head, correct?
They were called the Aints, yes. And one thing I do want to say about Texas Tech, when A&M called me and I turned the job down the second time, I said, you need to make one phone call. Steve Gettin is your man. And so whenever I talk to Steve, of course, if I took the A&M job, Steve is not coaching there. It worked out for both of us for sure. But yes, I was such a huge, and I am today, the biggest sports fan you've ever met. Huge Texas Rangers fan, big New Orleans Saints fan, and I lived through a lot of tough years, but I was also there in Miami in 2010 to watch the Saints win the Super Bowl, and that team means a lot to me growing up, and it means even more because of what happened to my son and the love that I received from the team because of what happened to my son Luke.
Yeah, let's talk about Luke. But before, you've done a great commercial for Texas Tech. What about Lubbock? I would think there's a lot of positives about Lubbock. Very wholesome place to bring a family up, correct?
It is. Lubbock is a great. When I was there, I think there was less than 200,000 people, and now there's close to 300. When I was there on the campus, I believe there was a little over 20 something thousand students. Now there's over 40,000. Lubbock sometimes gets a bad rap because of the wind and because of it's very flat. But it's a wonderful family town and it's an incredible college town. And now, of course, with all the money in the NIL, Cody Campbell has done a tremendous job and, getting money to the players and our football and basketball programs are so successful. Track, softball, golf, I can go on and on. I would say Texas Tech is one of the top programs nationally in all sports combined. And I'm really proud of that. And, being a Razorback and then a Red Raider for 23 years, I have two schools that I just love so much. And I love the city of Lubbock. And, ultimately I decided to move out of Lubbock because of what I experienced with my son. Now being in Dallas, I just love being here and love, everything what this great DFW community stands for and what it has to offer.
Now, before we transition to talking about your son and the tragic accident and what you're doing today, I see you're helping people, families with greater challenges than inefficient forehand. But Dave, any more questions on the tennis side?
No, I think that covers it really well. Tim, if you want to just maybe share, Tim and I spoke months back and Tim nearly came aboard our team of coaches, and tell them a little bit about where you ended up and what you're doing now.
Well, tennis, as you know, was my life at an early age. And then when my son had his accident, the last thing we ever did prior to his accident was play tennis. And so for 9 years, I couldn't look at a tennis court, be near a tennis court. And since I moved to Dallas, I began playing tennis, and I'm now on the court 2 or 3 times a week playing. It has been such a good thing for my heart, my soul, and so I'm doing that, and I'll get into what I do now full time. But I also felt like something was missing, and just started teaching tennis again. And I'm so passionate about the sport and passionate about kids. My good friend Paul Wagner has a junior program in South Lake following the team practices at South Lake Carroll High School. And so I'm on the court, 12, 15 hours a week now in the evenings, early evenings, late afternoons, teaching tennis. And I just love it. And it's just it's such a full circle thing for me to have been my life and then not in my life at all for 9 years and not teaching a tennis lesson for 10 years, back being part of tennis again. And at 62 years old, I love it. And I'm just so grateful that I'm healthy, to be able to play tennis and also to coach again. Dave, I want to say this, that what you have going on at Brookhaven is tremendous. If I weren't in Keller and I was closer to you, I'd be in Dallas nonstop. I certainly love what you do with your program and how well you've done it. And you've got an incredible staff. And what I see, those kids work so hard, and they're working hard because of you. So a lot of admiration and respect in your way for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's start with share with the listeners where you were, what happened with your son.
I decided to leave Texas Tech because I wanted to spend more time with my family. At the time, I had an older daughter from previous marriage, and then I had a 12-year-old daughter, 10-year-old daughter, and a 9-year-old son. And Luke was the absolute perfect son. He was well-behaved. He was respectful. He was a great athlete. And he was my buddy, my hero. And he played baseball, and he just loved sports. And we loved the Saints together. And I had resigned from Texas Tech on July 8th of 2015 to spend more time with them and to coach middle school and high school. 20 days later, I got a phone call that no father ever wants to receive, that my son Luke was at a friend's house, unsupervised, on a golf cart, souped-up modified golf cart, and the golf cart landed on top of Luke's chest, and he suffered head and chest trauma and was in cardiac arrest for 7 minutes. And my life was turned upside down. I had a wife, I had 3 daughters, and now a son who had a globally damaged brain, an anoxic brain injury. We spent 44 days in Lubbock. We spent 4 months at Cook Children's Hospital in Fort Worth. And the doctor told us that Luke would never use his limbs, use his voice, or open his eyes. And eventually he did all 3, but not enough to warrant staying in the hospital. And January 6th of 16, I became Luke's primary caregiver, took Luke to PT/OT speech. Eventually we went to Fort Worth to do therapy every week for 2 years. And I poured my heart and soul to be his primary caregiver. I was his night nurse 5 nights a week. I took Luke to all over the country for therapy, stem cell, laser therapy, hyperbaric oxygen. And I just wanted to see that Luke was going to do more than what we were told, and he did. And I always tell all the families that I reach out to that the greatest therapy that Luke ever received was love. And he received that from his family and from me. And Luke went from being nonverbal, no response whatsoever, to moving his tongue, to making sound. Luke was making tremendous progress. I would ask Luke to move his tongue because he loved the Saints, and he would move his tongue. And I would tell Luke, I love you. And his response was, like he was telling me the same thing. And I just knew he was going to speak. In the middle of August of 2021, Luke got COVID. And one thing I'll never forget, I spent the night at home. My wife was with Luke in the hospital. And I got a knock on my door, get to ICU. And on my way to the hospital, I heard a voice. You're going to be okay, but Luke's not going to make it. When I got to the hospital, that's exactly the same thing that the doctor told us. And a couple of hours later, on August 19, 2021, my 15-year-old son, Luke, passed away. But one of the things that I know is that I'm keeping Luke's legacy alive every day. And I'm doing that through a nonprofit called Team Luke Hope for Minds, which was started in 2018. And we support children all over the country. We're in 47 states. We have given out close to $500,000 to families all over the country. We help through education, support groups online. We have a conference every year. 200 families attended last year. And so, although Luke is not speaking, he is speaking. He's speaking through me. And keeping his legacy alive is my number one mission and passion. And Team Luke Hope for Minds receives 25 applications every single month. And some months we can't get to all of them, but we help them through education. We give families financial support, as well as the others that I mentioned. We have to raise money in a variety of ways through certain individuals, through events that we have. We have a big event coming up March 26th at the Star with Darren Woodson of the Cowboys speaking there. And we've had tremendous support from Patrick Mahomes, who has worn the Team Luke Hope for Minds bracelet. He's never taken it off. since he's been a member of the Kansas City Chiefs. Drew Brees has come to do events in Lubbock, and the tennis world has been tremendous as well. Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic have all sent Luke videos when he was with us. And then Andre Agassi, Andy Roddick, John Isner, Danielle Collins, Brad Gilbert, Justin Gimelstob, Jimmy Arias have all done events for us to help raise money. And so, the Tennis Channel has done a story on us, and ESPN has done a story on us called A Father, a Son, and Their Saints, and that's on YouTube. And then closing with this, we had a documentary that came out last year, and it's called Hope Beyond the Diagnosis, and that is also on YouTube. And those athletes have been in there. We also talk about the families that we've helped. So, it as difficult as it is talking to you that my son is not here, because when I watch football, when I watch any sporting event, I think about my son. When I go to church, when I see a father and a son, it's on and on. I think about my son 24 hours a day, but I do know that I have finally overcome anger, bitterness, and the need to forgive. Once I forgave the family, I moved on, and I have 7 inspirations from Luke that I share when I give my talk. Find your passion, don't ever quit, lean on friends and family, make good choices, have faith, find forgiveness, and let a loved one's legacy live on through you. And I've done a lot of that. I've spoken obviously to Brookhaven and to college tennis teams. I had a Zoom call today with Oral Roberts, talking to their team about the 7 inspirations and then motivating them when it comes to tennis and being leaders, all those things. And so I do all this in memory and in honor of my son. And my son loved the number 3, and I always talk about the number 3. And I always tell the teams that I talk to, think of 3 words, fight like Luke. And I hope that I've inspired a lot of people, because I know that Luke every day continues to inspire.
Oh, Tim, thanks for that. The documentary I watched, that Hope Beyond the Diagnosis. Steve Denton gave me a copy of the book, Fight Like Luke. What about you've written a second book? Tell us about that.
Yes, I've written 2 books. The first book came out in 2019. It's called It's in God's Hands. And I'll never forget, I came up with that title because the doctor told me there's nothing else I can do for your son, but it's in God's hands. He thought that Luke was going to pass away that day, and Luke lived 6 more years. That book is about being a caregiver. In 2022, December of 22, I came out with a book called Fight Like Luke, Transforming Grief into Love, Strength, and Faith. And that is a book about a year in the life of a father losing a son. I'm in the process of writing a 3rd and final book, and that book is about how I've healed. And it makes sense to write a 3rd book because of Luke's favorite number, but also because I'm in a much better place. Sadness is a much better thing to deal with than anger and bitterness. And it really came down to one thing. Once I forgave the family, then I was able to live freely, a weight taken off me. And then it's a message that everybody can think about, because forgiveness doesn't hurt the person that you need to forgive, it hurts you. And that's something that it took me 8 years to forgive, but once I did, I changed my life. And I'm in a much better place now that I'm in Keller. I've met a wonderful girl, Terry. We've been dating now 6 months, and just fantastic. And she's got 2 daughters that play soccer, both for A&M and Lubbock Christian. So I'm back in the throes of watching Division I college athletes, Division II as well, and just love it. And so I'm finally in a place that I feel that is taking me where I didn't know I could ever get to. I didn't think I could ever find joy again. And I certainly have found that, despite the sadness of losing my son.
Oh, it's great to hear your words. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, I mean, listen, Tim, to have you come and speak to the kids, and I know you've done that throughout the country, you leave such an incredible mark on the people that you touch, probably in so many different ways. Why don't you tell us a little bit about, you're on the GreatBase podcast now, but tell us a little bit about your weekly podcast.
Yes, thank you, Dave. I have a podcast called Tuesdays with Tim, and I interview families, moms and dads who've been through or going through what I went through, therapists, nurses, doctors, and also those who've been impacted by Luke. And there's a lot of those. And Patrick McEnroe's been on, John Isner, Elvis Andrews of the Rangers. I'm going to have Darren Woodson on. So and also friends of mine who've been impacted. And so it's a podcast that I believe touches a lot of families, because especially the moms and dads that are going through the unknown, the challenges of dealing with a child with a brain injury, while also trying to navigate being the best spouse and being the best mother or father to their other children. And it can be isolating. It can be devastating, of course. But my message to them is to never give up hope, because Luke's brain was globally damaged, but he made improvements. And I share how important it is for therapies, but I also share how important it is love. And I never talk about Luke to Luke. I talked to Luke. And I treated Luke like he understood, and he did understand. And as it is hard for me to fathom to this day that that the NFL playoffs are going on, and I can't share that with Luke. But you know what I do? I write to Luke once a week. I write to Luke. I also do 3 things every morning. I write down 3 things that I'm grateful for. A good friend of mine, Bobby Bank, told me to do that, and I've been doing that since the beginning of this year. It gets me on the right foot of thinking about things that matter, things that I'm grateful for, because being grateful is the most important thing you can do in life.
Oh, it's so well put. Dave, weren't you classmates with Jeff Lush?
Yeah. No, I wasn't. I was helping you on staff that year.
Okay, because Tim, young guy, I remember he came in and his parents were divorced and his mother lived in Arizona, but he grew up in upstate New York. And I just said, well, where are you from? He said, Phoenix. And mother said, you're not from Phoenix. And he just, 18-year-old talking to his mom. He said, no, I'm from New York. I said, where in New York? He said, upstate New York. And I said, where in upstate New York? And he said, Chittenango, which was like 5 miles from my parents' doorstep, next town over. And that's actually where the author of The Wizard of Oz is from Chittenango, New York. They have yellow sidewalks, and the ice cream store is called Oz Cream. But I remember being in the room with his mom, and she was told, "You never walk again." You've already done this, but and just listening to the documentary, it makes you really stop and think. It impacts everyone in the family. I think so. Sometimes you just think of the victim, the person who's been injured. Recently, a couple of years ago, a young boy, Colin Matthews. I mean, I think he was already 6 feet tall. He could run a 4:30 mile, and he was moving up the rankings to maybe like 11 UTR, and just got in a freak accident. Just tragic.
From Fayetteville, Arkansas, and we've helped the family. And I have visited Colin a couple of times. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I went right after it happened. I remember being at Kalamazoo with my son. I think it was Jeremy Wertzman. I should know. But my son was like 8 or 9 years old. He jumped on a golf cart, and right there at Stowe Stadium, he just almost drove right over it would have been a terrible accident. I think golf carts, my brother Pat, he's a little bit older, but he totaled a golf cart. I live in Ave Maria, and that's the means of transportation here. Talk about brain injuries for a minute. What are, obviously swimming pools. Just list off some of the freak accidents where some of the numbers on that documentary, how many brain injuries per year is just amazing.
Every 9 seconds. Yes. Every 9 seconds, there's a brain injury among children. And the one we see the most for non-fatal drowning, it's the silent injury. But golf cart, ATV accidents, car accidents are the ones we see the most. There's a difference between a traumatic brain injury and anoxic. Anoxic, you lose oxygen, and much more difficult to overcome. And that's what Luke had, lost oxygen. But the one thing I do know is the brain can rewire, the brain can heal, the brain can improve. And I saw that with my son, a globally damaged brain. And so when I talk to families whose child had an injury, maybe not as severe as Luke, never give up hope. Maybe your son or daughter will never be exactly the same, but there can be improvement. And the quality of life is everything. And it was difficult because Luke's quality of life wasn't great at the end. And I do have the faith in God that maybe it was Luke's time, but we're still carrying on his legacy. But I have seen firsthand so many families with their child improving from one year to the next. Seen that firsthand when they bring their families to the conference. And so I'm just blessed to be part of such a great staff. We have 9 people on staff, and we get together quite a bit, and we do all we can to raise money. teamlacopforminds.org is our website. You know, you never know. You might not know a friend of a friend of a friend who has a brain injury, and just for spreading awareness is everything. Letting people know about what we do and how we help, because we can make a difference for sure.
And you serve as the executive director?
That's correct, yes.
Tell us, Texas Tech, the number 3 is pretty much retired from the football team. Is that right?
That's correct. The number 3 is given out now to the hardest worker and the greatest fighter. You don't get to have it; you have to earn it. Pretty special. When every year I meet the new player that wears number 3. There was a player last year, Corey Aiken, who wears 8. He wore 8. Excuse me. And coach said, "Listen, you've earned the right to wear 3," and he jumped at it because they know why they're wearing it.
Oh, okay.
And it's the greatest honor anyone could ever give to be able to. And then also there's a baseball field called the Luke Siegel Field. And then there's also at Texas Tech Baseball, it's the Luke Siegel Sandlot. So the community of Lubbock, Texas has just been incredible, overwhelming the support that we've received. And that's why when I go back to Lubbock, I'm so appreciative. It's hard for me, but I'm so appreciative of what that community has meant to us over the last so many years.
Go ahead, Dave. We can wrap this up here.
Yeah, well,
Amazing.
I mean, I feel honored, Tim, to listen to you this evening, but to consider you a friend and to have you back in the Dallas-Fort Worth area contributing to the sport and just living your life to, here is great. I know that I'm ready to go run a marathon right now after listening to you. I feel like everybody will be, and I just look forward to many years in Dallas here, and we got to hit some balls.
Well, listen, I appreciate the opportunity to be back in the sport of tennis again, but I really appreciate both of you and Dave getting to see you in action this last year and a half, and I love being out here, and I'm going to be supportive, and you mentioned the National Indoors. I'm actually going to be a commentator for the semis and the finals at there, and I just love supporting SMU and TCU, and people always ask me, will I ever coach again? I am coaching. I'm just coaching a different team, Team Luke. But now that I'm back in tennis, I'm going to spend the rest of my life involved in the sport that gave me everything. And even though I quit cold turkey for 9 years, I'm back and loving it. And I am blessed. I've gone through the unthinkable, but I also know that Luke's legacy will live on forever, and he's going to continue to make an impact, because I'm going to make darn sure that I keep his name out there for the rest of my life. So thank you guys so much for having me on today.
Yeah, thank you. You are a saint. I think we can wrap this up by going through slowly the 7 inspirations. But before we do that, tell us about Intense Tennis. Should we just do one more question? Tell us about Intense Tennis.
Yes, Intense is a new professional tennis league. There were 3 teams last year. There's now 10 teams in Atlanta, and it's a timed tennis league. There's 4 men and 4 women, and you play for 10 minutes, and there's timeouts. You can substitute. It's really exciting new deal, and it's going to be for former college players and low-level pro players, and the league. The season is in June and July in Atlanta, and I'm now going to be one of the coaches, and it's my kind of foray back into team tennis, and I'm really excited about it, and that's going to be awesome for me. My daughter Kate is the executive assistant for the CEO of the organization. So if you go on it, it's called Intense. I can't wait, and I can tell you guys this, that the DFW community is next on the list potentially for having teams. So it could be in 2027. So that's something to look forward to. But I love the idea of this format, and can't wait to get to the courts in Atlanta and coach out there. And The draft takes place March 13th, and these are great players. 80 players going to be in the draft. 10 teams with 8 players on the team. And I will wrap up with this. So the 7 inspirations: find your passion. Don't ever quit. Lean on friends and family. Make good choices. Be careful. Have faith. Find forgiveness. And let a loved one's legacy live on through you. And I believe that whether you're 8 or 88, 1, 5, or all 7 of these can apply to you and make an impact on you and have a long-lasting effect on your life. And so I love getting in front of people and sharing these 7 inspirations. And I think that when I give these kids their bracelets that says Team Luke Open Minds or Fight Like Luke, I think that it makes an impact on these kids. And that's my goal in life, to keep my son's legacy alive and to impact as many people as I can. So thank you all so much for letting me be on this podcast today. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you, Tim. Our listeners obviously will be grateful for the opportunity to listen to you and what you're doing, what you stand for. Just one more time, so people, if they can donate money, the name of your organization.
Team Luke Hope for Minds. If you go to our website, there you can look at all kinds of different things, but you can go to the donate button and donate, because these families need help. They need to be able to go to therapy. They need to be able to, because so many of these therapies are not covered by insurance. So I'm just so grateful that I pray every day that we're going to be able to continue to raise money to be able to help these families, because we don't ever want to tell a family no. Sometimes we have to tell them hold on, because it's about raising money to be able to help these families. As I said earlier, we're getting 25 applications a month. So it's just, there's a need. And I'm thankful that we're able to help as many families as we can. We need to continue to raise money each and every day. So thank you guys so much for offering this, because every dollar counts.
No, inspiration and perspective. I was listening to your documentary and going, I have a copy of your I think I thought it was your first book, but your second book, Fight Like Luke. And, then it met with a tennis player who was just drowning in self-pity and feeling sorry for himself. I'm not mentioning any names, but I'm just thinking there's a lot of things that are tougher in life, tougher challenges than hitting the ball in the bottom of the net. No, thank you for your time. Thank you for what you do. Thank you, David. Thanks, listeners. And it was a great session. Appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate the support.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Everybody, good night. Thanks again. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, listeners. Adios. Adios, amigos.
Adios.